Hey everyone and welcome! Today we're going to dive into a really fascinating blueprint for how machine learning is tackling a huge problem in youth sports. We're talking about injury prevention. We'll be walking through the strategy behind a platform that's really changing the game, a brand called Pocket Coach.
Alright, so what's this all about at its core? Well, the mission here is to figure out the perfect training load for young athletes. The goal is simple, but it is incredibly powerful. To get them to peak performance on the field, while, and this is the key part, seriously cutting down the risk of injury. We're going to use the Pocket Coach project as our guide to see exactly how they pulled it off.
So why is this such a big deal? Just look at this number. Every single season, a staggering 30 to 40% of young football players get hurt because of their training. That is a massive percentage. It's a huge red flag that tells us the old ways just aren't working, and we need a much smarter, data-driven approach to keep these kids safe and on the field.
Okay, so to really get how we go from that giant problem to a real-world solution, we're going to follow this 5-part journey. We'll start with the crisis itself, then look at why AI is the perfect tool for the job. After that, we'll break down the actual blueprint, check out the key tech choices they had to make, and finally, see what it takes to get a plan like this into production. First up, let's zoom in on this injury crisis. You see, the heart of the problem isn't that coaches aren't trying. It's that they're stuck using these outdated manual methods. When you don't get the training load right, the consequences are very real. You're looking at injuries, wasted potential, and big costs for everyone involved.
And here's what's really happening behind the scenes. Think about your average coach, already juggling a million things. On top of all that, they're spending an extra 2 to 3 hours every week wrestling with spreadsheets and just going off of gut feelings. This kind of one-size-fits-all approach just can't account for how different each player is, leading some to be overtrained and others to be undertrained. So, if the old way is broken, what's the game changer? Well, that brings us right to our second point, why AI is the answer. As it turns out, this specific problem is just a perfect opportunity for machine learning to come in and make a massive difference.
So what makes it so perfect for AI? It really boils down to these 3 things. First off, it's technically feasible. We have the data, we have the models. Second, the value it creates is just on another level compared to the old way. And third, it's actually deployable. You can build something that a real coach can actually use in their day-to-day workflow. It ticks all the boxes.
And that value proposition is just huge. An AI model can do something a human with a spreadsheet simply can't. Think about it. It can look at everything all at once. GPS tracking data, how well a player slept, their wellness surveys, even if they're in the middle of a growth spurt, and then create a personalized recommendation for every single player. It's the only way to solve this personalization puzzle at scale.
Okay, let's move on to section 3. The blueprint itself. A brilliant idea is one thing, but you need a rock-solid plan. For this project, the team used something called the CRISP-DM framework. You can think of it as their detailed game plan, a way to make sure that the tech they were building would actually deliver real results.
And what I find so smart is how they define what success even means. They split it into 2 buckets. On one side, you have outcome metrics. Those are the big picture business goals, like reducing injuries and saving coaches time. On the other side, you have output metrics. That's all about the model itself. How accurate is it? And, maybe most importantly, are coaches actually using it? You need both to win.
And to get there, they didn't just build it and hope it worked. They had this super rigorous 3-phase plan. First, they tested the model on old historical data. Then, they did a shadow deployment, where the model ran in the background, making predictions without anyone seeing them. And finally, they ran a full-blown A/B test to prove it was better than the old way. This step-by-step approach is just brilliant for taking the risk out of the project.
Of course, a great plan needs the right tech to back it up. So now let's get into the nitty-gritty and look at the 3 most critical decisions they made when they were building the system's architecture.
First big decision. Where does the model actually live? In the cloud or on the device itself, what they call the edge? They went with the cloud. Why? Because having all the data in one central place is absolutely key. It lets the model learn from everyone and get smarter over time. It also makes things like updates and data compliance way easier to handle. And since coaches plan ahead, they just didn't need the instant predictions you'd get from the edge.
Second key decision. How does the model learn? Does it learn continuously, in real time, or in batches? They chose offline learning, with the model retraining every week. Now, this is a really important insight. It stops the model from overreacting to daily noise, like a single bad night's sleep. Instead, it learns to spot the real underlying trends in a player's fitness, which leads to way more stable and trustworthy recommendations.
And the third choice, when do the predictions actually get made?
on the fly, or all at once. They opted for batch prediction. Basically, a job runs every single night to get the next day's recommendations ready for every player. This fits perfectly with how coaches actually work. They plan their sessions in advance. Plus, it's way more efficient than making hundreds of separate requests. And now for our final section. And this is where the rubber really meets the road. A model that works perfectly in a lab is one thing, but making it work out in the real, messy world, well, that means you have to plan for all the things that can and will go wrong. So the team basically planned for failure by thinking about 4 major risks. You've got things like training serving skew. That's when the data the model sees in the wild looks nothing like what it was trained on. There's latency. What if the nightly job runs too slow and the report isn't ready for the coach in the morning? And then you have data and concept drift. That's just the natural process of the model getting old as the world changes, and the patterns it learned no longer hold true.
So, we've walked through the problem, the game plan, the tech, the reality checks, which brings us to the big question. After all of that careful planning and hard work, what's the end result? What did they actually build?
And this is it. This is Pocket Coach. It's not just an app. It's the final product of this entire data-driven blueprint we've been talking about. It really represents a huge shift in how we think about developing athletes. By taking all of that complex data and turning it into simple, actionable advice, it lets coaches be coaches, just with a new level of superpower. The future of coaching is here, and it's safer, it's smarter, and it is absolutely powered by data.